The laughter inside the house rose and fell like a performance rehearsed too many times. Glasses clinked, music played, and conversations overlapped, yet something hollow echoed beneath it all. The lights were warm but tiring, the decorations beautiful but unnecessary. Maya smiled when she was supposed to, nodded at jokes she barely heard, and thanked people for compliments she didn't care for. Every expression was an effort. The house looked alive, but she felt nothing but the weight of pretending. Rayhan moved easily among the guests, his voice carrying over the music, charming everyone with his usual confidence. He had that way of making people feel seen, though his eyes never lingered on her for long. When someone mentioned how lucky she was, Maya's smile faltered just enough for the wine in her hand to tremble. Lucky. The word sounded foreign. She had once believed it, back when his laughter reached his eyes, when their silences were comfortable, not suffocating. Tonight, his attention was scattered everywhere except where it once belonged. The music softened as the doorbell rang, pulling Rayhan's voice to the entrance. Who could that be at this hour? Someone laughed, but when the door opened, surprise replaced laughter. Ayan! Rayhan exclaimed, pulling the man into a hug. The air shifted. Maya turned, her expression instinctively softening. The guest everyone hadn't expected, an old college friend, a familiar name, a forgotten presence. He smiled, eyes warm and easy, the kind that carried stories from years that felt safer. Ayan's arrival was like a breeze sneaking into a closed room. He greeted her politely, and for a moment, the noise around them dulled. There was no grand exchange, just a shared stillness, an acknowledgement of familiarity. When Rayhan introduced him to the others, Maya noticed how natural he seemed, how laughter came to him without effort. He asked her how she'd been. Her answer came slower than usual, cautious but honest. Busy, she said. And you? His smile deepened just slightly. Trying not to be. Dinner unfolded with easy chatter, but the rhythm of the evening had changed. Maya noticed Ayan listening when she spoke, a rare thing in Rayhan's world of interruptions and jokes. His questions weren't meant to fill silence, they carried curiosity, the kind that lingered beyond politeness. Rayhan dominated the conversation, but even as he spoke, Maya felt Ayan's quiet presence. When she laughed at something small, Ayan's eyes flickered toward her, and in that instant, her smile felt genuine. It startled her how simple it was, how effortless it felt to be noticed without trying. As the evening aged, people began leaving one by one. Hugs, thanks, empty compliments filled the air. Rayhan stood by the door, shaking hands, promising reunions he wouldn't keep. Maya stayed behind, clearing glasses, moving with practiced efficiency. Her hands worked faster than her thoughts. She didn't notice when the house grew quiet until only soft music remained. When she turned, Ayan was still there, stacking plates on the table. You don't have to, she said. He shrugged lightly. Old habits. Couldn't let you do all the work alone. It was such a small gesture, yet it felt strange, almost intimate. Rayhan's voice called from the hallway, telling someone goodbye. His footsteps moved away again, back to laughter, back to his phone. Ayan handed her another glass, and for a moment their fingers brushed. Neither reacted, but something unspoken tightened the air between them. They worked in quiet rhythm, moving through the aftermath of celebration. The smell of wine and perfume lingered. Ayan spoke suddenly, softly, almost to himself. You both built a beautiful life. Maya's lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to agree, to affirm the image they'd created, but the truth caught in her throat. We tried, she managed, forcing a small smile. His gaze lowered, respectful, but she saw understanding flicker through it. He didn't press. Rayhan reappeared briefly, phone in hand. You two okay here? He asked cheerfully. Almost done, Maya replied. He smiled, distracted, then stepped outside to finish another call. Ayan looked at her then, something thoughtful behind his expression. He hasn't changed much, he said. Still the center of the room. She nodded, focusing on a glass she was drying. Some things don't change. And you? He asked quietly. Did you? The question startled her. She set the glass down carefully. Maybe too much. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had been said. Time stretched thin. The last notes of music faded completely, leaving the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of curtains in the night air. Ayan leaned against the counter, studying the remnants of the evening, the mess, the half-empty bottles, the fragments of laughter now gone. It's strange, he murmured. How nights like these look perfect from the outside. Maya met his gaze. They're supposed to. Something in that exchange settled between them, neither flirtation nor confession, just recognition. He understood something without needing it explained. The clock ticked faintly somewhere in the distance. Rayhan's laughter echoed faintly from the porch. Maya looked toward the sound, then back at Aya. There was a moment, brief, suspended, where she wondered if he could see the exhaustion she hid so well. His eyes softened, and she felt exposed without being touched. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. He smiled gently. I almost didn't. Why? He hesitated. Because some memories aren't easy to revisit. She didn't ask which memories he meant. The air was too fragile for more words. As the clock neared midnight, the lights dimmed further. Rayhan's conversation outside drifted into distance. Ayan gathered his jacket but didn't move to leave. She stood near the counter, aware of the closeness, aware of everything left unsaid. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. And that realization, so simple, so quiet, was what frightened her most. The celebration had ended hours ago, but the night hadn't. Something unspoken had arrived with the surprise guest and refused to leave. As Maya turned off the last light, her reflection in the window looked like someone else entirely, someone she hadn't met in years. The sound of Rayhan's laughter outside felt miles away, and the silence inside her chest grew loud enough to drown it. The house was spotless again, but something had changed, something invisible. Ayan's voice, calm and low, cut through the silence one last time. Good night, Maya. She didn't turn around. Good night, she replied, her voice steady though her hands trembled. He left without looking back, and yet his presence stayed, lingering like a scent that couldn't be washed away. Outside, Rayhan kept laughing, still playing host to ghosts of his own. Inside, Maya stood in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the echoes of a night that had begun as celebration and ended as something she couldn't name. She looked toward the door where Ayan had stood moments before, and for the first time in a long time, she felt both seen and utterly alone. The night had thinned into quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound deliberate. The celebration was gone, the lights lower now, only a few lamps casting soft circles on the floor. Maya moved through the room, collecting the last of the plates, her body still moving on habit though her mind wasn't there. Ayan lingered nearby, not speaking, the faint clatter of glass between them the only trace of company. The air carried that faint warmth left after too many goodbyes, a strange mix of comfort and emptiness. He poured himself a little water, the sound crisp in the hush. You should sit, he said. You've been working all evening. She shook her head, her eyes on the floor. It's easier to keep moving. He smiled faintly. That sounds like something I'd say. His tone wasn't teasing, it was the kind of understanding that made silence heavier. She stopped for a moment, as if realizing how long it had been since someone noticed that part of her, the restlessness she disguised as duty. Rayhan's laughter echoed faintly from another room. It faded as a door shut, and suddenly it was just the two of them, the space between them stretching and shrinking in the same breath. Ayan looked around the room, at the decorations that still hung, slightly tilted, and the photographs that lined the shelf. You've done well, he said softly. The place looks beautiful. Maya followed his gaze but didn't smile. It's his idea of beautiful, she murmured. I just keep it running. Her words slipped out before she could stop them. He didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, that same quiet attention he had at dinner, the kind that unnerved her because it felt too honest. You used to talk about wanting something simple, he said. A home that felt like peace. She met his eyes briefly. Peace is expensive, she said. Sometimes you trade it for stability. Ayan nodded, thoughtful. And is it worth it? She didn't answer, only reached for another glass to dry. The movement was enough of an answer. He sat down, elbows on his knees, voice low. You know, when Rayhan told me he was getting married, I was happy for him. He said he'd found someone who made him better. I thought, finally. He used to be restless. Maya laughed under her breath, a short, bitter sound. Still is. Just hides it better now. Her tone was steady, but her eyes didn't hold it. Ayan studied her quietly, his fingers tracing the rim of the glass in front of him. And you, he asked. Do you still hide yours? She froze. The question reached too deep. What makes you think I do? He smiled faintly. Because people who don't stop pretending at some point. You're still pretending. The word struck something sharp inside her. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the effort felt pointless. Instead, she said softly, pretending keeps things from breaking. He leaned back, voice quieter now. Sometimes things break anyway. For a moment, she couldn't look at him. The clock ticked somewhere behind them. The sound of Rayhan's voice had gone silent. He must have stepped outside again. Maya's shoulders sank. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. They sound like they mean something. He looked at her then, not smiling anymore. They do. The air changed again. She turned away, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a bottle. He took it from her gently, their fingers brushing again, slower this time. Neither pulled back. Ayan, she began, but he interrupted softly. I'm not saying anything you don't already know. Her eyes glistened under the low light. You shouldn't. I know. Then why are you still here? He hesitated. Maybe because I missed something I didn't realize I missed until tonight. She exhaled, the sound shaky. You shouldn't say that either. I won't, if you tell me to leave. She didn't. Instead, she sat opposite him, the space between them thick with everything they weren't supposed to feel. His gaze didn't waver, it wasn't hungry, just knowing. He spoke softly, you look tired, Maya. Not just tonight, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Her voice broke. Because I am. The confession surprised her. She hadn't said those words to anyone before. He reached across the table, his hand resting near hers. The gesture was cautious, gentle, like he was offering her a choice. Her fingers twitched but didn't move away. You deserve to be happy, he said, barely above a whisper. She almost laughed. Everyone says that when they don't know what else to say. No, he replied. I say it because I remember who you were before you started convincing yourself that this is enough. That silence again, stretching. The kind where breath feels heavy. She wanted to look away but couldn't. Her pulse thudded against the quiet. The clock ticked again, slower now, each second louder than the last. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if timing was different? He looked down, eyes dark with memory. Every day. That answer did something to her. Her chest ached, and she realized how close they'd come without moving at all. It wasn't the distance between their hands, it was the space between everything unspoken. A part of her wanted to pull away, to protect what was left of her boundaries, but another part stayed still, starved for understanding. A faint sound broke the stillness, Rayhan's footsteps returning from the porch. Ayan pulled his hand back instantly. Maya stood, too fast, knocking the chair slightly. Her heartbeat roared in her ears as Rayhan entered, phone still in hand, his mood bright. "You two still awake?" he asked lightly. Ayan smiled, controlled. "Just helping her clean up." Rayhan nodded, oblivious. "You always were the helpful one." He chuckled and reached for a leftover drink. "It's good having you here. Been too long." Ayan nodded again, his eyes briefly meeting Maya's. A second of quiet understanding passed before Rayhan spoke again, breaking it. "You remember our college nights? The chaos?" He laughed, and Ayan joined in just enough to fit the moment. Maya forced a smile, her hands pressed against the counter to hide the tremor in them. Rayhan started another story, his words blurring into background noise. Ayan's laughter sounded distant now, strained. When Rayhan turned to pour himself a drink, Ayan's gaze flicked toward Maya for a brief heartbeat, one last silent exchange, one that said more than any word could. By the time Rayhan finished his story, the moment was gone, hidden beneath laughter and normalcy. Ayan excused himself to get some air. Maya stayed behind, her eyes fixed on the untouched glass on the counter, her breath uneven. She heard the sound of the front door creak open, then shut again. Rayhan kept talking, unaware the night was still again, but its stillness wasn't the same. Something reversible had been set in motion, not through touch, not through action, but through understanding. The kind that stays long after words end. Morning arrived with a silence heavier than the storm outside. The air in the room was thick, as if it carried the memory of everything that had taken place. Aisha opened her eyes slowly, the reality of the night before flooding her chest like a weight she could not lift. She did not look at Danish immediately, afraid of what his expression might reveal, afraid of what her own would betray. She knew she should feel relief that the night was over, but instead she felt the crushing truth that nothing in her life would ever return to what it was before. Her first instinct was guilt. Every thought of Imran stabbed at her with sharp precision, his trust, his absence, his unawareness of what had happened. She imagined him calling to check on her, his voice calm and certain, never suspecting that in the very hours he was away, his friend and his wife had broken the bond he believed unshakable. Aisha tried to steady her breath, but each inhale reminded her of the betrayal written into her body, a story she could never erase. Danish moved quietly, the sound of his steps unsteady, as if he too carried the same burden. He did not speak at first, and she was grateful for the silence because she did not know how to form words. What could be said? That it was a mistake. That it meant nothing. Both would be lies. The act had been born from need, not accident, and its weight was too heavy to dismiss with convenient phrases. She knew if he spoke, his words might undo her further, so she remained still, her hands gripping the edge of her chair until her knuckles ached. When he finally did speak, his voice was low, stripped of the warmth it usually carried. He told her he wished he could take back the night, not because he didn't want her, but because it left them both bound to a secret neither of them could confess. Aisha closed her eyes at his words, her heart aching at the truth. What they shared could never be acknowledged, could never find daylight without burning everything around it. What had felt like salvation in the dark now felt like poison in the morning. They packed their things without looking at each other, every movement deliberate, careful, as though avoiding eye contact might undo the fragile control they clung to. She wanted to tell him something that could ease the weight, but no words came. He too kept his silence, speaking only when necessary, as if anything more would only deepen the wound. When Imran arrived later, smiling with the casual ease of someone who trusts completely, Aisha's chest tightened until she could hardly breathe. She hugged him, but it felt wrong, her arms trembling, her lips pressed into a smile that felt foreign. Danish stood nearby, speaking casually, hiding the truth behind a mask that Aisha envied. She envied his ability to slip into normalcy, even if only on the surface, while inside she felt herself fracturing. The days that followed were worse than the night itself. At home, every word Imran spoke felt sharper, every question felt loaded, even when it was not. Aisha could not separate the ordinary from the guilt that clouded her mind. She began avoiding his eyes, turning away too quickly, speaking less, afraid that her silence might confess more than words ever could. She told herself she could bury it, that if she never spoke of it, the night would fade, but her heart betrayed her. Each time she saw Danish at gatherings, the memory returned with unrelenting force. One glance was enough to remind her of the line they crossed, one shared silence enough to reopen the wound. Danish, for his part, grew distant. He spoke to her less, avoided lingering near her, avoided conversations that stretched beyond the necessary. She told herself it was for the best, that the distance was a form of protection, but it stung nonetheless. He had been her comfort once, the only person who made her feel seen, and now even he turned away, as if the memory was too dangerous to hold. She began to realize that the affair had not given her closeness, it had only deepened her isolation. At night, lying beside Imran, she replayed the choices that led her here. She wondered if he could sense the change in her, if her silence felt heavier to him, if her touch betrayed hesitation. He never questioned, never looked at her with suspicion, but his very trust was its own punishment. She carried his faith like a burden she could not bear, each day adding weight until she could hardly stand beneath it. She thought of confessing more than once, but each time the image of his face shattered her resolve. The cost would be too high, the damage irreversible. And yet, silence did not erase the truth, it only forced her to live with it. She carried the night like a secret scar, invisible but always present, reminding her that even a single moment could rewrite the course of an entire life. For Danish, the distance eventually became permanent. He stopped visiting as often, excused himself from gatherings, let their connection fade into something unspoken. Aisha felt the loss sharply, but she knew it was inevitable. They had reached for each other in a moment of weakness, but it was not love that bound them now, it was guilt, shame, and a memory neither could bear to face too long. And so life resumed on the surface, with dinners, conversations, routines, as though nothing had ever happened. Yet beneath it all, Aisha carried the knowledge that the night had not been erased. It lived in her silence, in the spaces between words, in the way her heart tightened every time she heard Danish's name. She had crossed a line, and there was no return. The truth would remain hidden, but the guilt would stay, shaping her quietly, endlessly, in ways Imran would never know. White heavy checkmark word count 770. Would you like me to now combine all three sections into one continuous full story, almost equals 2,280 words, for a smooth final draft?